This is a production of Cornell University.
Thank you, Vivian. Thank you, everyone, for joining me today to discuss my research. Well, I try to make it a little bit different with the previous talk that I recently gave at Cornell. So today we'll focus a little bit more on applications. So as you can tell from the title, it's monitoring plant stress through water use perspective using remote sensing and cloud computing. And I think, this is a really nice day to give a seminar talk. It's Halloween and also a special India festival day. So, like for the Halloween, we have like a trick or treat. It's the same for our environment. Do you treat it well? Otherwise, it can get spooky, right? So, as we all know that the projected population in 2050 will be a large amount of population. So we also need increase our food production to feed this increased population. And when we do that, we really need to assess how the current agriculture model works to help us achieve both the food security and also the environmental goal. So studies indicated as the first figure here that with the current agriculture model, we could somehow get less for the food security goal, but our impact on the environment could be large. And this is not what we want to see. So to transition this from the top scenario to the second scenario, with that we achieve the goal for both security, food security, and also environmental goal. I think we really need to have innovation in agriculture management to help us. As you can also tell that water is a large component from the agriculture impact. And this impact could be further compounded by the drought. And with the drought events, it's getting so hard to predict. And also the drought start to show up in areas that historically don't experience drought. So this is the US drought monitor on the top for the CONUS. And on the second panel here is for the New York State. As we can tell, although New York State, we don't really have those very severe drought, which is the dark red color, we do have drought, and the drought tends to happen more frequent. And if you zoom into a certain time period and look at when the drought happens for each of the year, you can tell that the lines in this figure here, they are July for each year. So this shows that drought tends to happen during the growing season and when the crop, the plants needs the water to grow. So for not just agriculture, for natural resource, for natural environment, water is so critical because they could eat too much water, too less water. Both extreme can be harmful for agriculture and for our natural environment. So with especially when we have drought, plant doesn't have enough access to the water, they start to be showing the stress signal. And this stress could making a lot of other effects develop, other than just a drought. There will be a disease, the pest, and also this eventually will impact the yield, and also for natural forest, it will impact the forest ecosystem serving functions. So for now, people with remote sensing, we can start to monitoring general trends. And with this is a USD Forest Service model that they use NDVI to try to find the stress signals. Because if you find the stress signal, then you can start to think about how you want to treat the stresses. But one question here is NDVI is showing basically how green your land surface is. But when the plant is under stress, it doesn't necessary to change color or to shred their leaves as the first response to the stress. So here we are really eager to look for an earlier signal that can tell us the stress before the leaf turns to yellow or before the leaf start to drop. So evapotranspiration, this is a process that the water goes through the plant and return back to the atmosphere, and it uses the same path as the stomata. It's a similar path as the carbon assimilation. So what we think before the leaf change color, we will see a signal of water use change, and which could be an earlier signal for stress detection. So talk a little bit more about evapotranspiration. It's actually two terms together. One is evaporation, another one is transpiration. So for evaporation, as you can tell, is the water returns back to the atmosphere from different surfaces, while the transpiration is the more biological part of the water use, which is the amount of water that plant extract from the soil, then return that back to the atmosphere. So combining these two, we call these processes together as evapotranspiration. And this is the second largest component in the hydrological cycle. Of course, the first one is the precipitation. And when we talk about evapotranspiration, actually historically, this is a parameter is hard to measure and it's hard to model, especially if you consider the difference between potential ET and actual ET. So a lot of previous studies, we use potential ET, we use vapor pressure deficit. That's because it was just easier to calculate from the meteorological parameters. However, there's key difference between these two terminology. So the potential ET is the ideal condition and how much water can be returned back to the atmosphere. So as you can tell, if it's sunny, if it's windy, and if it's dry, you would expect a higher potential ET because the atmosphere just needs a lot of water. So this is the demand, which is mostly for the potential ET part. But whether we can provide that much water to return back to atmosphere, so that's the limitation. Combining both the demand and the limitation together is the actual evapotranspiration. So for the limitation part, we need to consider whether we have enough water in the soil to support this, and whether the vegetation is healthy and the stomata is all open, ready to do the transpiration, and also how rough the surface is, the soil surface and also the canopy surface. All these can impact actual evapotranspiration, which is the AET. So today I will talk about the AET, and I will go through the methods that we developed, improved, and also the product that we developed, and also applications. So first, we'll talk about the algorithm for the actual evapotranspiration. Of course, there are now with machine learning, there are a lot of methods. There are this process-based model, and it can be also machine learning data-driven model. And here, what I'm going to talk about is energy balance model. So why is energy balance? Think about, like in physics, there are actually a lot of assumptions. Is the balance, mass conservation, energy conservation. So the energy balance method is we assume the net radiation we get, like the energy we get on the Earth's surface, it will be partitioned to three energy components. One is how much energy is stored in the soil. And another part is how much energy is used to change the air temperature. Like when you feel it's hot outside, it's cold outside, that's the sensible heat. And then the rest of that is latent heat, which is the energy used to transfer the water from the soil or water surface back to a vapor condition. So which is the part of the energy that is used for evapotranspiration. So in a lot of this energy balance models, we actually calculate this latent heat, which is the LE term there, as a residual of the system, because it's just so hard to directly estimate it. So here I'm showing you one of these energy balance models, which is called Alexi DysAlex model. And this is a model that I have been working on since my postdoc. And it was developed by my postdoc advisor. And for this model, it actually has two components. One component is on the coarse resolution, which is Alexi model. The reason we have this is because to have this energy closure, we need to have a system that you can consider the closure, right? So to consider this system, we need the atmospheric boundary layer condition. So that's the hard part to get, so that we rely on the geostationary data, which is the weather forecast satellite in the space, because it's coarse resolution, but it's very frequent. So from that, we can grab the information of the atmospheric boundary layer development information. Then we can have a closed system to consider the energy balance. So for the coarse resolution part, one key input is the land surface temperature. So this goes to the cooling effect of evapotranspiration. I always like to use this example as, in the hot summer days, when you sweat, actually your skin is cooler. And this is the same for vegetation evapotranspiration. If you have water transferred back to atmosphere, it uses the energy. So it has the cooling effect. Your leaf surface will be cooler. So that's why land surface temperature is a very important parameter that we use in the model. Other than that, we also need to know the condition of land surface, which we use vegetation index. So we know where the vegetation is and where we know the bare soil is, so that we can estimate E and T, because E is from different surfaces and T is from the plants. So that's the coarse resolution. And for the finer spatial resolution, we call it disaggregation of Alexi, which is dysalexy. So for dysalexy, we borrow this air estimation for the boundary condition that we estimated from Alexi and use that in the dysalexy, but change the land surface and vegetation index, land surface temperature and vegetation index in input to a finer spatial resolution satellite data, which now we use Landsat, EcoStress, and WIRS. So these are different satellites in the space. So now you can see this is really a hierarchical structure that involves satellite data from different spatial resolution. And for satellite data, normally if it's different spatial resolution, it's different in temporal resolution. The temporal resolution meaning is how often it comes back to the same place. We also call this as revisiting time. So combining all these different satellites together, we can estimate evapotranspiration at different spatial and temporal resolution. Normally, coarser spatial resolution has more frequent revisiting, and finer spatial resolution has a longer revisiting time. So as you can tell that for a lot of agriculture applications, what we need is high in both spatial resolution and in temporal resolution. So that's why we came up with a data fusion method. Then we can combine the advantages of high frequency from coarse resolution data and the high spatial resolution observations from those satellites that they don't have a very frequent revisiting time. So combining all this, we want to get a daily field scale evapotranspiration estimation. So I will give a little bit more about this data fusion, like multi-source data system, because I want to get a little bit new things in my slides that I didn't talk in my interview talk and also another talks. So this is different sources of land surface temperature. As we identified that land surface temperature is really important input for our energy balance model. So these are the satellites that we are currently using, which the first is geostationary one is the GOES data, the weather satellite for the United States. MODIS and WIRS is polar orbit. Polar orbit means it goes through the polar part. So that's the MODIS and WIRS. The spatial resolution is 500 meter, but is daily revisiting. And Landsat has been a really golden observations for us working on field scale because it provides 30-meter spatial resolution, and but the revisiting time is relatively longer because it's 16 days. But now we have two Landsat in the space, Landsat 8 and Landsat 9. So combining these two together, we can get the revisiting time to 8 days. And then the ISS orbit is the ecostress sensor. Ecostress is a thermal-only sensor, so it only measures the land surface temperature. It's on the International Space Station. Because it's on the International Space Station, so it goes to a very different orbit. The revisiting time is about 4 days. And also considering like in the future, we also have multiple sensors that is planned in the future. For example, the Trishna from European and Landsat Next, which will be launched in 2030, which will be launched by NASA and hosted by USGS. So why we need all these data together? This is a simple identification of these different data, their frequency. And this area actually is for California. California is already clear during green season. And you would see a more added value actually for a cloudy area. So for the first one is Landsat 8 and 9, which is the key input currently for a lot of operational product of ET. Then Sentinel-2 is the European satellite, which doesn't have thermal observation. So it doesn't measure land surface temperature, but we can get vegetation index from Sentinel. And ecostress is thermal only, it just measure land surface temperature. So combine these all together, we can see a lot more samples that we can get over a growing season, which can help us to better estimate evapotranspiration. Because if you don't have satellite observations, you can only do is interpolate between the 2 days that you have observation, which is not ideal. The ideal condition is we can get observation for each day, but there will be a long way to go. And also comparing with the Landsat and ecostress, this is how many clear images that we can use for a year. This is in 2022. With darker color, it's more images over that area. So you can see Landsat really have limited images. And combining with ecostress, there are a lot more. So the difference is we use the number of ecostress minus the number of Landsat, so we can get the number, how many more images we can get. So the question is, okay, so we have all these satellite observations, and there will be more in the future. Whether you can directly use them together, actually not, because they are so different. The key difference is the spatial resolution is different. So as you can tell that Landsat 8, EcoStress and WIRS, this is the relatively the image from the sensor, and they get coarse and coarse. So what we want is field scale. And if you look at the WIRS data, you don't really tell the field anymore. So what we need to do is we need to first unify the land surface temperature from different sensors. And here we use the data mining sharpener, which is a machine learning based method for the land surface temperature, which we can sharpen the coarse resolution of land surface temperature to a field scale. Then we can put this as input into our model to estimate field scale evapotranspiration. Okay, so now with all these, satellite method, energy balance, what we actually want to get is a 30-meter daily evapotranspiration estimation so that we can use it for different applications. So now we are going to start with some applications because this talk will focus on the plant stress detect. I will use our vineyard work at California as an example to demonstrate how we detect plant stress using evapotranspiration data. So this is the GREEPAX project, which is a collaboration between NASA, ENG Gallo, and the USDA. So the project lead is Bill Kustas and also Martha Anderson, who's my postdoc advisor. So this is a project that we have been working on for many years, actually. And these are the sites that we selected. They are ENG Gallo Vineyard. And for each of the sites, we have observation capabilities, the instrument, a flux tower, PhenoCamp, all these observations built in these sites. And we evaluate our modeled evapotranspiration for each of the sites by comparing with the flux tower observations. So here, it can give us confidence how we can further use the model of the evapotranspiration. So you can tell that the dots here are observations, and the red line is our simulated daily 30-meter field scale ET, which performs very well. And other than just look at how it works for these flux tower, we can also look at the spatial pattern. So this is the ET, the cumulative ET for this vineyard area, and start from the start of the growing season and all the way to the peak of the growing season. So you can tell how these different fields, they start to use a different amount of irrigation over the year. And also these are the vineyard, and they're also like natural trees over there. So it's very useful for the growers that they can look at this spatial map to understand how the different water is used. Then how this water use can be transferred to a stress signal. So we actually using a very simple anomaly method. So the anomaly normally compares with a baseline, right? So if you have a long-term observation, you know the baseline. And for each of the data comes, you can compare that ET value with the baseline, and that can give you a signal of stress. But here we are not actually directly compare the ET value because ET changes a lot. It's not just impacted by the plant itself. A lot of actually is impacted by the weather, right? Today and tomorrow, the plant won't change much, but you probably see the ET change a lot if today is sunny and tomorrow is cloudy. So we normalize the evapotranspiration, use the reference ET to remove this day-by-day difference of the weather condition. Then we use this ratio to calculate the FRET anomaly. So this is the index that we use to capture the stress. So this is the one example of one of the vineyards. On the top is this FRET value. The red line is our model, the black dots are the observations. We can use these data to look at these abnormal values. And when you compare these abnormal values with the vineyard management, you will see all these differences comparing with the normal condition. Sometimes it's due to the drought, as you can tell, the California drought. Sometimes it's due to the management. For example, this is a time period that they grafted and they trimmed. So this is we use this anomaly index to help us identify what's different comparing with the baseline. So with this, we can look at the spatial pattern of water use for different years among different months. And then when we use this value to minus the baseline, we can clearly tell which part is not performing as supposed to be. So this is different as of what baseline tell you. The red color means it's lower than the baseline, which gave you a signal of either the plant needs water because they are using less amount of water, or there is also a signal that there might be some kind of disease or pest for those fields that impacted the plant water use. Then growers can use this map to locate to the field, to look at the field for further management. So GRIPEX is a large project. I'm a part of it. And what is very excited is actually just this Tuesday and Wednesday, a few leaders of the GRIPEX project visited us. And Kitty Gold from the horticulture and me, we together hosted them at Geneva campus. So as you can tell, Bill Kustas, Martha Anderson, Joe Alfari are here to visit our Geneva vineyard site. And this is also part of my new research that I want to bring the GRIPEX experience to our New York vineyard growers and to see under different climate conditions with different varieties of grapes, how much we learned from GRIPEX can help the growers in New York. So stay tuned. Hopefully next time I will have some results for this. And we are planning a flex tower over one of Katie's field site. So she has the disease measurement and I will have the water and carbon flux measurement. Collectively, I think we will have a lot of interesting findings. Okay, so other than the crops, actually, I also did a lot of work for natural forests. But because of time, I'm not going to talk about this in detail. But we did use this water use information to help us to understand plantation management, the thinning, harvest. These are all the signals that you can find from water use. And these are all published papers. If you're interested, you can look at them and we'll look at Missouri forest drought impact and also how the forest compositions and management impact different water use. And also the restoration of different pines in the Southeast area, which is a large conservation effort in Southeast now, and also wildfire impact over the west of US. So these are the works that we have published. So now you can tell that we spend a lot of time to explore how we can use this data. And when people start to adapt to this method, there's new issue is how we can provide people the data, because this is very computational resource intensive. So for a local server, we cannot estimate a large area. So that's why a few earlier studies, you can tell they are just limited with small area, because just we cannot run it for a large area. So how we can provide this regional data to people who are interested. So this is another key project that I also have been worked on for multiple years. And I'm super excited to see how this project turned to. So this is the OpenET project. It started with a lot of collaboration efforts from different government agencies and universities. And actually at that time, we started to think how we can provide this data to the end users, not just in the scientific community. So what we did is we brought our model into the cloud, which is the Google Earth Engine. So we integrated 6 different ET models into Google Earth Engine. Then we can directly do all the estimations in the cloud. Nothing need to be done locally. Everything is in the cloud, and the results are saved in the cloud. And to make the accessible of the data, we also developed a website, which is this opendata.org. And you can look at the water use from different fields. And we also developed the API that people can directly download images and time series, do a little bit more advanced data extraction. So the 6 models that we have is these well-established 6 models, and Alexi dyslexia was one of them. And we also have another ensemble value, because a lot of times users, they don't need 6 values, especially when these 6 values are all different. So they want one value, which is ensemble. So we also studied a lot how to get to this ensemble value. And we went through careful evaluation, and the evaluation results turned out that the ensemble actually performs the best, which is also what we want to see. And we also have published another evaluation paper that was published earlier this year on Nature Water, which is also the cover page. And from this study, we evaluated our OpenET product comparing with the different flex towers all across the CONUS. So that paper have very detailed information about the performance of different models and the performance of models at different locations. So now we have the ET data. We are still work very hard to expand this to the east. So now I think we have a little bit more, but didn't get to the New York State yet. And this is where the multi-source data could be very helpful for the next stage, because we all know the Eastern US is cloudier than the Western US, and we'll need more satellites to work on this. And this is, if you get to the OpenET website, you can zoom into the website. We already have field boundary there. You can look at the water use for each of the field. And currently we have data from 2016 to present, I think. And also we have this API there. You can use it to download data if you're interested to explore certain area. We are also building this farms tool that use this farms tool. Farmers can bring their own boundary shape file into the platform so that they can get routinely report of their field's water use. So I do see there's limited of time, but I also want to show you that with the OpenET, we are not limited to small areas. we can do regional studies, but still keep this fine spatial resolution. This is a study that my PhD student, she's currently working on, look at lower Mississippi alluvial plain agriculture activities and how these activities impact the water use. So this is the study area, and along the Mississippi River, you can see it's a highly cultivated area. And we used the OpenET data to analyze for these different crop types. Soybean is a green color, corn, cotton, and rice. How these different crops use different amount of water. And here we can get a very typical plant water use curve. So this is the average from multiple years, which agrees a lot with what we observed in the field, that the yellow line is corn. It shows a higher water use during the first stage of the growing stage. And the cotton doesn't need that much water. So this is what we get statistically from the OpenET data. And we can also look at how these, we can look at the water accounting for this region. Because the same as, you understand your bank account, we also want to understand the water account, how much water we used at different locations and how much water is extracted from groundwater. The groundwater information is this blue bar that shows all negative value. The negative value is is always withdrawal. So that also explains why this area we see a consistent groundwater depletion. And for these drought years, we do see a higher groundwater withdrawal to maintain the agriculture activity over this area. And again, we can also look at the spatial pattern for different area. They tend to use different amount of water over a growing season. So this is the same area, start from May all the way to August. On the top is leaf area index, and the second panel is the evapotranspiration, which is the water use. So I will try to go quick because this will be something I will further work on. Is very high resolution ET, because 30 meters sometimes can be limited for specialty culture, like the specialty crops. This is a vineyard from Katie's field that we do need finer spatial resolution details. And part of my group's work is using UAV data. So we fly drones to collect images. Then we can really get very detailed information on the ground. This is two sites, a fully irrigated and deficit site. And you can see how these are input be different. And this is our evapotranspiration estimation, the first one. You can also tell how different the evapotranspiration use for the fully irrigated and deficit. They are next to each other, but they are very different. So this is a 3 meter evapotranspiration data, and this is 30 meter. So now you can tell why we want to go a little bit further. This should be fine for corn belt, field crops, but for a lot of the specialty crops, we do need a finer spatial resolution. My group is also working on a deep learning method to help us directly sharpen the OpenET 30 meter data using planet observations to get a 3 meter ET for the specialty crop management. And with now a lot of interest from different fields, they want to look at either the water use or the plant response or water accounting. You can see there are new ET data every day. You can see new publications every day using ET or try to produce ET. So with a lot of these new efforts, how we can have a standard to evaluate these new data, right? If I just change a model, apply it to an area, can I claim it as a new model, or whether my evaluation method is a standard method? There's no standard now. So what I'm currently doing is I'm leading a group of scientists internationally from different countries, Australia, China, Europe, that we are trying to understand what's the current status of the satellite-based evapotranspiration product. And through this AGU talk, we will further establish a working group that we will work together to get a protocol that to help the entire remote sensing community to get a standard for the ET data evaluation. So with this, I'm going to conclude my talk. So it's basically the take-home message is we spend a lot of effort to make this as a product open to the public, especially open to the users. And then this data can be used for a lot of applications: water accounting, plant stress detection, on-farm management. And we are still working on a lot more of this exciting applications. And I also want to thank my funding agencies for all these work. Thank you so much. Do we have time for a couple? Yeah, Johannes, we do have time for questions.
Thank you so much. That's very impressive. I'm really excited about this. I had a question about data ownership. You mentioned the aspiration is and evidence for it that it's open, accessible, but who owns the data? You're working with Google Earth. Google probably uses the data for all kinds of things and maybe claims some ownership. So what are the conversations about that? Not that I trust actually governments any better, especially with catastrophe potentially coming upon us next week. But no, who can be trusted with these very important public goods? And how do you and your colleagues are talking about ownership of these data for the future?
Oh, thank you so much for this important question. The question is about ownership of the, I would say, OpenET data. So we do have a lot of discussion. And what we actually have now is we are trying to define a better intelligence property certificate for this data. So there is like a more computer science field. There are a bunch of these IP certificates we can use. And later we choose one of them. There's a number, I cannot recall it. So we choose one of that. So that data is open and people can grab it, modify it, which I don't know whether we want to see that. But for further, actually the OpenET group, we formed a nonprofit organization, I think two years ago. So we are having a nonprofit organization that we have board member. We also are, we have the capability to raise fund to allocate the funding between different science teams. And how the Google Earth Engine is involved, I don't think they really claim the ownership, but I do see the tricky part because among our in-group discussion, we discussed a lot about when Google Earth Engine is going to start to charge us and how much it will charge us. And this is
their health hospital.
Yeah.
And all the discussion about OpenAI is very similar. It seems to be similar.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah, but well, so far Google Earth Engine has been supportive, but we had some discussions about that. Yeah, thank you. Other questions?
Yep, I have a question. So it seems like most of the applications have been focused on sort of water stress in the crops.
Yeah.
And I'm in upstate New York, we often might have the other problem where we have too much water sometimes a year. And I'm specifically thinking about the soil and nitrous oxide loss. And I wonder if this tool could be useful for making like field level predictions as to sort of timing of fertilizer application or spatial distribution of fertilizer to try to minimize N2O, to find wet spots and then avoid those wet spots or wet times.
Yes, for sure. I think this will be a very interesting application. And actually, like through the last 2 days workshop with the GRIPAX team, we were thinking about because for the vineyard here, not just like field crops, vineyard, apple orchard, they all have this like more water issue. So we were thinking about to explore the data to see whether the higher ET could be related to some of these, what you talked about, the on-farm management, and could be a link with the pest and disease. Yep. This will be, I think, something new to the ET community to explore. Thank you.
This has been a production of Cornell University, on the web at cornell.edu.